Dun, 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 dun. So, World in Conflict, published by Massive Entertainment, is a strategy game with the typical World War III U.S. gets invaded by Russia plot. But you know what? It's actually a pretty damn good game. So yeah, basic premise. Instead of collapsing in 1989, the Soviet Union decides to just declare full-on war against all the NATO-packed nations. And, of course, U.S. is one of the NATO-packed nations, so they get involved. And eventually, the Washington state gets invaded by Soviet forces. And, yeah. Now, I know what you're thinking. It's pretty much just recent Call of Duties, just as an RTS instead of a first-person shooter. But you know what? Alright. As far as RTS goes, this is a lot more fast-paced and more accessible than most. Like, alright. The whole way this works is, instead of building bases, because let's face it, that's the main... I like RPGs, but that's the main reason why I don't play video games, because I don't have the patience to build bases. But that's not how this works. Instead, you have a number of reinforcement points that you have drop zones, just drop in like tanks and infantry and that kind of stuff, and occasionally helicopters. And like as units get lost, you can just call in more eventually. And it's hard to explain, but they explain it pretty well in the tutorial. It allows me a lot more accessible and fast paced than most other RTSs. And there are no aside from helicopters, there are no other air units or sea units. You call in airstrikes and artillery, which is cool. I love calling in airstrikes and artillery. It's always something probably one of the things I enjoyed most about the game. But yeah, so yeah, basic premise is like I said, World War III is going on, and then eventually, like I said, Washington State gets invaded, and there are a number of characters. The main character is a U.S. Army Lieutenant Parker, who you play as essentially. He's the commander of not the commander, but he's like I said, he's the guy who's supposed to be controlling all those units that you are as the player. Like this, you never actually hear him speak or see his face, but he does like the older versions of himself from years later does a narration, and he's voiced by Alec Baldwin, so that's cool. And there are a number of other characters. There's like this incompetent army captain who's trying to get redemption, and a couple other characters, couple of young grunts who used to be National Guard are kind of caught up in the invasion and have to do their best. And again, none of this is really that deep, but it's deeper than, like I said, deeper than any of the recent Modern Warfare games. And there's about 16 missions, and like there's about the whole second act of the game is kind of like a flashback back to like before when the war first broke out, and you're in Europe fighting the Russians there. And I got the complete edition, which includes the expansion packs, Soviet Assault, which includes 6 missions entirely from the Russians' perspective, which is actually pretty awesome. Like it's not that many new missions, but like you actually kind of sympathize a little bit with the Russians, and the number of characters on that. Like there's this political officer, there's the young character similar to Parker, the Russian version of Parker Romanov, who you play, who's like the player character for the Soviets, and there's this your commanding officer who's actually kind of against the war but does his best, follows his orders, and other kind of characters. Again, nothing too deep, but there's like I said, there actually is some character depth to this game. That's just like I said, you somewhat care, maybe not completely, but you somewhat care about these characters more than you care about anybody in the Modern Warfare trilogy. So anyway, more about the actual gameplay. Like I said, you have those reinforcement points instead of building bases, and the game looks pretty damn good. The environments are pretty big, and the single player campaign, like I said, is pretty good. Like I've not actually played the multiplayer because I just really don't do multiplayer gaming. That's usually where it's at for most games I know, but I can't review the multiplayer though. But I imagine it's still pretty good. And there are some pretty large scale battles, not all of which are controlled. Like there's a lot of usually a lot of like AI units going in the background. They're fighting other parts of the map to kind of add to the scale. I will say that basic infantry in this game, you really almost never really need to use them. In fact, they're kind of more of a nuisance most of the time. I usually just use vehicles really, unless they force me to use infantry. Like the anti-tank infantry are cool because they're weak, but they pack a punch. They're like tanks, but without all the armor. And there's a sniper guy who can snipe units from really far away, and there's an engineer who can blow up whole buildings with one single move and that kind of stuff. But the actual basic infantry, they're useless. They really serve no purpose, at least in the single player campaign anyway. And also, I play a little bit on normal and easy. I never really played the hard difficulties. Maybe there's ways to use them in the hard difficulties, but the interesting thing about this game is that infantry of all types can actually get run down by vehicles. Like, I'm not kidding. Even a simple jeep can just run your guys down. There's even like a mission where they tell you like don't use infantry because the streets are too narrow that your tanks will be sitting ducks. But then the enemy's using vehicles and they just keep running my infantry down. So finally, I'm just especially when there's a moment where artillery starts pounding and you got to like rush the artillery position. And infantry, unless they're in vehicles, are really slow. They can sprint for a little bit of time, but they're not as fast as vehicles. So honestly, I usually just use vehicles if I can help it. Like just use a bunch of tanks and a bunch of either jeeps or armored personnel carriers because they have machine guns they can take out any infantry. And every unit has some kind of special ability too. You often need to use anti-aircraft tanks too. When facing enemy helicopters, and there's a lot of variety of the missions too. There's like one mission where there's all the infantry are controlled by the AI. You have to cover them from the air with helicopters. And you got to watch out for all the enemy AA guns, which is more difficult than it looks. But it's pretty fun. And there's one mission where you're pretty much doing almost nothing but calling in artillery, which again is a little more fun than it sounds. It's actually like I said, there's a lot of variety to the missions in this game. So, and like I said, good story, good gameplay, a lot more accessible than most RTSs, and like I said, like the whole story is handled way better than, and as far as World War III goes, than any other game in recent memory that's handled that same plot. So I'd strongly recommend it. I will also say, do not get the Steam version. The Steam version has some kind of issue. I don't know what, but just don't get the Steam version. The Steam version just has problems playing. I don't know if it's recovered now, but I just eventually end up getting the Amazon download versions, and those versions work fine. I will say, though, I'm not sure what the problem is, but do not run this unless you still have a Windows XP. Do not run this game go to the options menu and make sure this game is only running on DirectX 9. If you set it to DirectX 10 and you've got Windows 7 or above, it'll crash every time you load it up again. Even though, not even playing when you play the game. Just the second you get to the menu, it'll freaking crash. I don't know what that is, and fortunately, the developer Massive Entertainment went out of business right after the game came out. Well, not right after, like not too long after the game came out, and so there won't be any official patches. There may be some unofficial patches, but I'm not tech savvy enough to really search for them. So if you want to get this game, all the original box versions are like used, but like pretty high. So I'd recommend getting the Amazon version. Don't get the Steam version for download. It's a shame that the RTS is really kind of like I said, I'm not the biggest RTS fan, but it's a shame that genre is really kind of dying out. Hopefully, I don't think it's dead, but like it's really only exists in the indie whole circuit now. You don't really see it too much in the mainstream anymore. And I think that's probably because they tried a whole bunch of times to make it accessible to consoles, but every time they came out with RTS for consoles, it just didn't do well. Probably because it requires a lot of hotkeys that this console controller doesn't have. So it's a shame. I really hope that the RTS gets some kind of comeback. I know the only mainstream RPG out there right now is StarCraft. Blizzard Entertainment and their procrastination with that are not doing the genre any favors, but we won't get into that. It's another story. So yeah, if you're into this kind of stuff, if you're into like war, if you like Call of Duty but wish they had a slightly better story, I'd definitely check this game out. And if you've never really played an RTS before, or if you haven't played one in a while and just looking for a more accessible one, definitely check this out. It's worth playing. It's older, but even though it came out like 2007, it's just like damn, like a while ago now by video game standards, it still looks pretty damn good. So, like I said, unless you got some kind of patch, do not set it to DirectX 10, and do not get it off Steam. That's the only thing I'll have to say. I can say warn you about, but so yeah.